Okay. You don't need me to make a recording too, correct?
No.
Good.
Come on. Gosh darn it.
Okay, so we're going to start the meeting.
Yeah.
And I think we can ignore my issues because I do complex things that nobody else in the group is doing, except Tim.
Uh-huh. Dangerous stuff. Or we won't admit to it, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, yes, good. Okay, to answer your question, Wayne, what is the best way to extend your Wi-Fi from the basement to the top floor? You need to unmute. You're still muted.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, I've got a cable comes right upstairs to my office upstairs there on the second floor, and with a switch, which I'm using on this computer.
Mm-hmm.
So but what I was thinking of doing was putting in like a Wi-Fi router.
You can use a Wi-Fi router, but you don't want it to do things like assigning DHCP addresses itself. What I've done in the past is I've used an extra router. I've plugged like into your switch. I have plugged into, where did you go there? I plug into the switch on the downstream side of the switch, not the input of the router, but the 4-port outs. So I connect into that. Okay. I have it set up its own SSID, and it can be the same or it can be different. Usually I pick a different channel than the other one downstairs is running on. I turn off any sort of DHCP access. So I rely on the primary router to assign DHCP addresses. And then I have Wi-Fi in that area, and you just need a cable that plugs into your switch, and you're good to go then.
So you use the same ID, or you have to use a different name?
It can be a different name. It can be the same name. I use different names, and I have multiple SSIDs in both places when I do that. I mean, I have some are the same, some are different, but I'm able to put out, as long as the computers that will use this know they can switch back and forth between those SSIDs with the same level of sophistication. I mean, you move them up in the list so that they are selected earlier. In case you'll have a primary, like I want the stuff in the basement to stay in the basement, not try and roam to the guy on the top floor. And vice versa. But if you have TVs or something, you can target them to use the one upstairs, and it doesn't even have to be full 802.11 AG NPQM whatever. It could be just an 802.11 AN router, ABG router. It could be either.
Yeah.
And for TVs, you can use 802.11a if they support it, and that's good for 50 megabits per second if you're close.
Wayne, if you run into a problem, just look up on the internet how to turn your router into a access point, because that's what you're doing. You're taking the router and making it into an access point.
Right.
And that'll act just like a repeater.
Okay, Sanford, you want to chime in on this, right?
Yes, I do. The way Wayne had put it, he says, what is the easiest and best way? The way I would do that is, I agree with you. You could take a router that's hanging around, but I would just go out and go buy a access point from something like D-Link or TP-Link.
Yeah.
And if you can, you could put those, I'm sorry, let me back up a second. You can configure it as an access point, so it would mirror all the settings that you have in your current setup in your house. The alternate way of doing that is I would run a cable directly from that switch to that access point instead of just plugging it into the wall. Because you could have the access point work as two different ways. It could be a Wi-Fi extender as an access point, which means it broadcasts your signal further than what it currently is going. But what it does is it pumps the signal back to the source. And that usually goes at a 5 gigahertz is what its preferred route to go. So if you have a lot of obstructions between you and your router at the 5 gigahertz band, you may run into an issue, which is why I would suggest to run a cable to it.
He's got a cable.
I have the
He's got a
cable.
cable he can do this with, so that
Yeah.
that
I got a-
alleviates that.
Yeah, I've got the cable and the switch, and I've got
Yeah,
an extra port
meaning
on
that
the switch.
The cable meaning you're going to want to run an RJ45 from wherever that switch is down to wherever you want to put that access point. And at this point, it could be anywhere you could run that RJ45 to. It could be at the furthest extent of your house if you wanted to. I personally have two of them set up and configured in my house that I run that same way. One I put out in my garage so I can get my Blink cameras outside to work.
Okay.
And the other is that because I live in a ranch house, it's really long. So I put the other one on the other end of the house, and I get full coverage throughout the entire house at 2.4 and 5 gigahertz. And again, I'm just using relatively inexpensive access points. You can get them for about $35 or less.
Where did you get those? What brand?
You could Amazon, Newegg. Again, I'm using. You could use D-Link. You could do TP-Link. There's several other makers out there that make them. Really, you just need to get a one that's going to cover the 2.4 and 5 gigahertz band,
Right.
or frequencies, and then wherever you can plug it in.
And it's not really a router. It's just what you call as an extender or a
Yeah, it'd be a Wi-Fi extender / access point. That's the
access
way
point.
they'll probably
Yeah,
call
okay.
it that. And
Yeah. Okay.
an access point will work if an extender. It's a play on words, but an extender will grab the signal from your main router
Yeah. Yeah.
and echo it or extend it throughout wherever you want it to broadcast. And
But you
access
lose. Yeah, you lose speed on that though because it's going back and forth.
Yeah, but don't worry over it.
I know.
You will lose some speed, but the idea here is now you're gaining more broadcast range than what you had before. If you went with an access point configuration, which is what I discussed about running a cable to it, then it just echoes your router completely.
Right.
And wherever that's at, it's as if you put a router right there.
Just be careful if you use a real old access point. You may not have a machine that can configure it via the web interface because some of the really old ones need JavaScript or they need Flash to be able to program them. I'm using an old Symbol / Motorola 5131 ABG access point that basically was designed in 2006. This one probably dates to not long after that. And it's been running for, 2013 without a hiccup. Gets rebooted every time there's a power failure. But other than that, it takes a licking and keeps on kicking. Yeah, it's still doing its thing. Yeah, go ahead, Tim.
No, that was Bob Baxter.
Oh, well, I see you're raising your hand. Bob's got his hands up too. Yeah.
Right. Two questions. I can't seem to get hands raised. I don't know why.
Check on reactions, and maybe the bottom button is a big oblong one that's raise hand.
So I've got a thumb and a waved hand. but yeah, I don't have one.
Hmm.
So anyway, I've got your attention. A question. I've had a little bit of success using Wi-Fi over the house wiring.
Okay, I know what
I'm on
he's
3
talking.
floors here, and the router is in the basement. And we're trying to set up an office for my wife on the top floor at the other end of the house. And so I put that in, and she gets some service up there, but she doesn't use a lot, so I'm not sure how secure it is. I also had a friend who passed away, and suddenly his wife's TV set wouldn't connect to the internet. So I put a set of those units in that house, and now her TV works just great.
The only thing you got to be careful of, and I've used several of those in the past until they stop working. They're usually limited to 100 megabit tops. They might be, the newer ones may go faster, but typically 100 megabit, and it helps if both of the outlets that you use are on the same side of the main.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Well,
if
they
you're
have to
using
be,
the other
because it
side
won't
of the
cross
main
that.
and you
Yeah.
don't have some high frequency capacitor to bridge the two hots,
Yeah.
it is harder for the signal to get across, unless it's trying to go through the refrigerator to get there. And usually that doesn't work so well.
Well, it goes out to the transformer, and it goes out to the transformer to everybody that's on that same side of the transformer.
And assuming that these aren't a mated pair and they think they use DES encryption between their ends, or they're supposed to, but
Yeah,
I,
that's the way my. That's
what
the way my.
these,
Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, what these systems often need, if you have zones, you need to put in a special bridge at your main box.
Yeah,
right.
that's the way my X10 works.
Yes, that would be the same problem. But like in my case, only my neighbor would be able to share my transformer because we're both underground and transformer is there about 100 feet from me, and that's what it would have to do. Anybody else trying to share it would have to do it on the 7200 volt line. So, and I don't think the signal goes through the transformer with the iron core too well.
No.
I thought it goes through the neutral.
It actually piggybacks on both the hot and the neutral. It's got to have two signals to work on.
Okay. And then somebody else picking up would mean picking up the signal outside of your house would have to have one of those receivers, because the modules are sold in a pair. You got to,
Yeah.
a master and a slave, if you will.
Yeah.
And so somebody else is going to have another slave somewhere else,
Mhm.
and then know your encryption to be able to, get between the two. It's
Right.
a lot of legwork for somebody to do in your neighborhood. So
Right. But I mean, I've done the AP backhaul 5 gigahertz. I've tried that before. I helped install one at one of the Sears stores in Schaumburg when it was still there and they needed connection to their automotive center. And we used 5 gigahertz backhaul to basically move the internet to that the automotive building. And it works as long as you don't have too much interference on 5 gigahertz and you have directional antennas. With the cabled route, and since you already have a cable, that's usually the easiest way to do it because you already got maybe a 100 base or 1,000 base connection to the basement. As long as you're not more than 320 some odd feet away, you're good. Get over that, then you're going to need to do repeaters on the Ethernet side. But most people don't even understand what that is, so don't worry about it.
another option is to purchase a Wi-Fi router, which you discussed in the early onset of this. You discussed about using a Wi-Fi router. But if you buy one that's from the same manufacturer and close to the same brand numbering system that you're on, that is, like, let's say it's an AC 1900. If you bought another AC 1900 or an AC 1700, blah, 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 it doesn't matter. You can then set up a mesh network. And that will work between this, if it's the same brand, it will work between the routers and they'll automatically configure themselves as an access point extender using the 5 gigahertz as the backhaul, and they optimize the software. But again, this is going to be relatively new equipment I'll say 5 years old or so, that this will
I've
work.
got a Motorola combo modem router.
Yeah, it's not going to want to play nicely with the other ones. I know exactly what you are dealing with. Yeah, mesh is going to be an option for a future replacement. But if you're doing 800 megabit download downstairs and you're doing it off your switch, you shouldn't have any problem with whatever speed AP you put upstairs, especially if you're just doing it for like something like a TV streamer or a Roku box or something. It should
Right.
have no problem with it.
Well, I've got a lot of switches, that work off of the Wi-Fi, for the lighting. I've got about 40 items that are hooked up through the Wi-Fi.
Hey,
Oh, okay, that's feedback there.
Uh-oh.
Tim plus Tim.
No, Tim to the Timpth. Tim to the 10th power.
Yeah. You have another speaker going somewheres, Tim.
yeah.
Now you
I
sound like
forgot
you're coming
that.
bottom
Well,
of-
having that third computer had the speaker on.
Yeah.
But what I was going to say to Wayne was you need to cut down half or more of those switches you got in your house so you can get a little bit of exercise.
Well, it's got, for the garage, 3 garages, they're all on Wi-Fi. The thermostat's on Wi-Fi, and I've got, I don't know, a lot of items like that. And of course, all my computers and telephones and
Yeah, but
iPads.
you need to get up
printers.
and move around a bit.
I have noticed, however, when you have a lot of IoT devices which transmit slower, that affects any faster devices that try and use that SSID. So at some point in time in the not too distant future, I'm going to start moving a lot of my devices to their own SSID so that anybody else trying to use the 2.4 gigahertz will use a different SSID for their computers. That way there's less contention for the access to the medium. I mean, they'll have to fight over what's left, but for the most part, most of the devices that I have that are there on 2.4 are slow. They're Wemo switches. They are Blink cameras. They are MyQ garage door opener.
Right.
Those things are all, for the most part, relatively slow, and they don't need faster access or continuous access to the medium. I mean, I also got to consider the fact that I have a bird feeder out back that also connects up to 2.4, but it goes to sleep long periods of time in between taking pictures, and then when it needs to talk to the Wi-Fi, it wakes up, reassociates, connects, does what it needs, and then disconnects. But with so many things on, I've noticed it is slower, much slower on the 2.4 band now.
My Motorola modem router, it's got both a 2.4 and a 5, but it automatically will switch back and forth depending upon what type of device you're hooked up to.
Well, the thing is all of my IoT devices don't support 5.
Right.
And when my computer gets, or like even my phone, if my phone goes outside, if I go outside to the mailbox and come back in again, chances are I ran out of range of the 5 gig and it switched to 2.4 and it'll stay on something unless it has a reason to switch back.
Yeah.
So I've noticed how come it's taken so long to load my email? Oh, let's see which SSID I'm associated with. Oh, I'm on the 2.4. Switch to 5. All of a sudden, everything loads immediately. But for the most part, I have 2 SSIDs the same, both on 2.4. One is a GN, the other one is just 802.11g. So there could be some contention there, but yeah, as long as they associate and they talk, pretty much fine.
You running 2 SSIDs from one router?
WCS 1900 are the Linksys 1900 ACS has two SSIDs, but not on the same frequency. One's 2.4, one's 5.
Right. That's normal.
Yeah. One SSID per, but I could put another one on there if I wanted by setting up a guest.
Yeah.
And what it does is it splits the DTIM interval, technical knowledge, technical jargon for the beacon that 802.11 transmits. And the beacons are transmitted, let's see. The beacons are transmitted every 100 milliseconds. DTIM is typically set to 3, so every 300 milliseconds is a beacon. So devices can sleep one DTIM period before they have to wake up. And if they don't respond to a message coming into them, then the access point flash router may initiate a disconnect. That's why you have to respond in a certain amount of time. Otherwise, click, crash, you're off. Now you got to reassociate, re-authenticate, and to get back in again. Yes, I did Wi-Fi in a past life. Okay, other questions people may have that are maybe related or unrelated to our topic?
Related.
Good.
There is, or at least there was several years ago, a concept of doing direct router-to-router communication and turning this kind of a mesh network into a neighborhood network so that you bypass your ISP and everything. Just for people to, kind of communicate back and forth, do a little messaging, things like that. Of course, there are FCC limits on how much range you can have.
Right.
But other than that, it's not illegal.
No, but a lot of wireless manufacturers of routers and access points specifically prohibit or have denied access between two devices talking back and forth to each other on the same SSID. Yeah.
Some of them have an intercom mode.
Well, I know some can, but like Cisco does not allow device to device. It prohibits that, and you see
Yeah.
that turned on in places like libraries.
Yeah, well, they can turn on the blocking option.
Yeah.
That's, it's like any parental control. You can turn it on, you can turn it off.
I mean, what I used to do, similar to that, is we used to use multicast, and you would broadcast on the multicast, and so one person would transmit, and then all of the devices that were running that software could receive the decoded audio. So it was like a walkie-talkie application over Wi-Fi. So one guy transmits, and then it gets repeated in multicast, and everyone receives it.
Yeah, I put in chat a little article from 2011, probably outdated, about how people were doing that.
Shareable.net. Thank you. I'll have to look at that sometime and see how close it is to some of the things that we developed.
In the neighborhood just outside of my apartment community, just below us, actually, physically below, topographically, there was a fellow trying to set up one of these neighborhood networks. And I never heard back because I didn't sign up for his newsletter.
Yep.
But you cannot do that using Comcast combination equipment. You have to use a third-party router, and it has to be a specially selected type. I think you might be able to use an access point this way.
Yeah, it would probably be an access point.
Yeah, it goes into access point mode.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
But I thought this was just kind of related to what we were doing with the mesh network here, with different routers that were the same model as Sanford said.
Yeah.
Is
But
Sanford still
usually-
here? Yeah, there he is.
For mesh networks, it's best if you are going to deploy a mesh that all devices are mesh aware or adaptable to, so that you don't end up with issues that cause your mesh network to choke itself.
So anyway, if you start seeing these aerial devices all over the neighborhood, you'll know what's going on. It's all going to be obsolete when they get 5G to the house, because that's already going to have neighborhood antennas.
It's going to have a lot of them.
Although, some people are scared of that.
I don't know why. I mean, it's no different than sitting next to their Wi-Fi router.
They think they're going to, well, a lot of people won't do that. They won't use Wi-Fi at all for the same reason. They think they're going to get cancer.
Yeah.
So they stop using their cell phones as well.
Hey,
Yeah, they
not,
will not put a cell phone to their ear.
not only that, I had a neighbor across the street before she got put into a nursing home about 5 months back. She would never have a microwave in her house because of the same concern.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay,
And
I
meanwhile,
will-
she was
I will
sitting
add that-
right underneath the cell. They put a cell site right next to her, right?
I think Sanford
It
has
would've
something to
probably
say
helped
about
her.
this too.
Well, I was going to say, in regards to the 5G microsystems that are being installed, you don't necessarily know in a town if they're there unless you go looking for them. Naperville has a large extent of 5G that's already been put in place in the neighborhoods. As you drive down a street, you'll look up on a street light and there's the little antenna, and it's not very big. And there's throughout the whole system, and they've been there for 10, at least 10 years. They've been there because they were there 1 week before I moved out of Naperville in my neighborhood. So, and I know they're there, and I was inquiring with Rick when I first saw him. I said, "What are these things?" And he came back and said, "Those are the new 5Gs." So, for what it's worth.
Yeah. Well, they can use multiple frequencies for their 5G. It doesn't have to all be above 24 gigahertz or something. I mean, they have the stuff in the 1 to 6, and they have even stuff below 1 that they can use if they've redeployed and opened the spectrum for it. So,
There are different use cases for different bandwidths, different bands.
yeah, it's distance. If you want to use 24, be real aware of what rain fade can do. If it's above 7 gigahertz, rain can affect it, and snow.
Yeah.
Below 7, for the most part, no.
And then the big companies, T-Mobile bought up all this band, all these channels for their rural big tower 5G, whereas AT&T Verizon went with the urban stuff, which is the little antennas.
Well, it depends on how many sites you want to deploy in a given area. If you really want to do 5G, you're better off with smaller cells and more of them. So that way, no one user is monopolizing the bandwidth. Because you can be monopolizing bandwidth on one site, but next door, microsite, could have 2 or 3 sites between you and the guy next door, if they really want to deploy it that way.
Again, in rural areas, people are so spread out, it's not much of an issue.
And then you have the same issue that they had with CDMA. When you have heavier users, the cells have a tendency to do what's called breathe. So they would reduce their coverage if there's heavier usage, and then if there's lighter usage, it expands. So you would go in and out of coverage depending on how close you are to the cell site.
Right.
Yeah.
And what they want to do is make everything almost seamless from the time you leave your HDTV, your smart TV, to the time you get on the internet, to the time you get outside on your cell phone.
Yes.
Or your mobile device, or in your car.
Yep.
Although you're not supposed to watch TV while you're driving.
In other news, I heard that one of our local television stations here has finally moved to ATSC3.
That really doesn't help those of us who like to time shift, because they're also encrypting everything. And
I don't believe this one is encrypted. I think somehow this one is there's one of the newer variants that doesn't encrypt.
Is that CBS?
Yeah, CBS.
CBS, okay, because they said you had to rescan your channels. I didn't hear when that was supposed to happen.
I think it already did.
Okay.
well, your WBBM always was way low down in the band. And
Well, it was
when I
up
lived
low
in
in the
Whit-
band, and then they moved it up when they went to HD. They got moved up from 52 megahertz on up to 208, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, The problem was they were Johnny come lately, so they got the worst part of the band with the most interference.
Yeah.
And
No
that's
solution.
why they've been really leaning into ATSC3. That plus the fact that in the future they can offer encrypted content.
Yeah.
And
Just as
so
soon as all local stations move to Paramount Plus and require a subscription.
yeah, that could happen. However, the historic case of Oak Communications and Channel 44 would kind of speak against that being a marketplace success. Although
It might
maybe
make
Oak
it.
was ahead of their time.
Yeah, I think, or they happen to leap in ahead with both feet. And I know how many Channel 44 decoders got built as G jobs at my former employer.
Well, you'd need a quantum computer to crack ATSC3.
In theory, unless you have the another way to do it, and I'm sure there's a way to do it. We just have to put our heads together and have two chat boxes talking to our AIs and say, "Hey, can you figure out a way?"
You would need to do something illegal. You would need to reverse engineer their equipment,
Mm-hmm.
and that's illegal.
That hasn't
So if
stopped
I-
too many people.
If I recall correctly, ATC3 is 4K, correct?
ATSC3 can be up to 8K, but it is currently 4K.
And it can rebroadcast like Dolby Atmos?
Yes, it can.
I believe
And that
so.
is one reason why HD Home Run really wants to get going with this. But they keep changing the encryption standards, they keep changing the requirements, they keep changing the licensing. And you have to obtain a license for each station or for each certificate. It's as much of a nightmare as security certificates are in Windows.
And
You
they're a
said
pain
they.
already. Yes.
You said they keep changing. Can you elaborate? Who is they? Are we
The
talking?
broadcasters have an association, and they are really tight buddies with the FCC.
Okay, thank you.
It's at least however many the party in power has packed the FCC with. And they used to be Trump appointees, so
Used to be. I'm not
now
sure.
they're
if we've
Biden.
changed
Now
the
they're
balance
Biden
yet or not.
majority. Now they're Biden majority, and so things shifted. Things shifted from PEI, I think it's pronounced Pi or Pay, who used to be the head of the chair of the FCC. Now they got a new chair, and she is doing things differently.
Yes. Net neutrality. Net neutrality.
Yeah, well, that's closing the barn door after the horse has gone out.
Yes. Always interesting. Okay. Other questions we have here. Yes, Wayne, you can ask another question if you want.
No, that's okay. I think I've got my thing answered. I got to research this now.
Now you got to figure out what you want to buy and where you want to put it.
Right.
I mean, like I said, what I've done in multiple installations in the past was real simple. I find an old access point that I didn't need, or actually a router, and then when I configured it that way, the only trick was to turn off the DHCP in the new router that I'm going to connect up, and then don't connect in for the front point of the router. You connect in on the switch end, and then it works like a champ. Just make sure it's not overlapping on the same channels. Pick your same or different SSIDs, and it's up and running right away. And it's easy enough to do if you got an old router.
Yeah, I don't have any old routers. The only thing I've got is an old combo modem router, and that won't work.
Technically, it could. Depends on whether it has multiple switch ports on the downside.
No,
Because you're not using the cable modem part, you're not using the router port for the input. You're just using the switch and the wireless. If you can configure just that, you could play with it and see if it works.
Yeah, even old routers that only have one downside port would work.
Yeah.
This is a combo though. It's all in one unit.
Right.
So
most of them are from the cable companies. They're combo boxes, and but your combo is a modem and a router in one
Right.
box, and
Right.
the you have the four ports, but some have as little as one downside port and one port that has usually a color band around it. That's the normal input
Mhm.
for from your modem into your router.
Well, this
Well,
doesn't
this is
have
a
that.
combo with the modem
It's a
built in.
combo. It's
Yeah,
built
but you
in.
could still use basically it's going to act like your because if when you remember you have a combo modem, if you disconnected the cable input on your cable modem, you could
Mhm.
still have devices talking back and forth to each other through that switch port.
Right,
Didn't bother them at all.
right.
Okay, it just acted like you had no upstairs internet, but you could still print stuff to the printer, and the printer would print it just fine. So that's
Yeah.
why I think it wouldn't care too much if you use that. In fact,
Yeah, there's also a setup called Mocha, which uses both wired and wireless.
Because
yeah,
see,
but
on that other modem, combo modem router that you got, as long as you're not hooking up the cable in the back end of it, you don't care.
Yeah.
You're only
Yeah, you don't
concerned
care.
about the Wi-Fi transceivers and the switch that's on the back for the downside, and
and no DHCP.
you plug your cable from the real modem router you're using into the back of that switch, then you have total access. And you still have three ports that you can use if you wanted to for other wired Ethernet type devices.
Yep.
I'll
Should
give it
work
a
fine.
try. I'll give it a try.
Hey, you got all the time in the world. You're retired, right?
Right. Oh, yeah.
I know how that fallacy works. Just means I have more stuff to worry about. Yeah. All right. Still have some time here in case anybody wants to have any other questions answered that they are. Oh, Sanford dropped and he came back. He's having internet problems, or
Well, he's been having some internet problems the last several weeks.
oh wow. Mm-hmm.
Maybe he's another one with Comcast.
Well, like I said earlier, and when not everyone was on, my problems are because Comcast thinks they're trying to upgrade me to 10G stuff in the area, and they keep promising me, oh, tomorrow will be the day. Yeah,
Sanford
TP Link.
put in a chat about a AC 750 router.
Yeah.
Or access
Well,
point.
as long as you have a wired connection between the two, either one is going to work. It's just that one of the poorer choices is if you use a wireless repeater. Yeah, that should work.
Yeah, and that's only 20, but it's less than $20.
Yeah, now see that connection in the back side of it is for your cable. You
Right.
leave that off.
You don't
Nothing
need
on
it.
it. See
Yeah,
that?
you don't need to connect anything up to
Yeah,
it. No,
right.
don't use that at all. Just the ones on the top. That's
Yeah.
right.
The upper ones are the switch.
Yeah.
So
you need
you
the
plug an
switch
Ethernet
and you need the
cable.
Wi-Fi.
You put
That's
a Ethernet cable into any one of those four ports up there.
Mhm.
Run
Okay.
it back to your real input modem router
Yeah.
switch, and then set up your Wi-Fi
Oh,
and
there's
disable
one
your
other thing you got to
DHCP.
do. There's one other thing you got to do before you plug it into everything, so you don't bring the whole system down. Take your computer, just plug it into that thing with it powered up, and change its IP address so it's on your subnet, but not 1.1, which is your main router downstairs.
Yeah.
So
Something
you got to
like,
change it to 1.250 or something like that.
or 253, something like that. But
Yeah, not 255.
not 255. And I think, am I remembering correctly, 254 might be tied up too.
No, 254 is still open.
Okay.
Perfectly legit.
I remember
So I just
255.
I just plug this in
Yeah.
into the computer to
Right.
Just
program
directly
it.
to the computer. Computer's not connected to the internet. It's only connected to that box with power on. Log into it, okay, which whatever password you can try and remember you used to have,
Oh yeah, I've got it. Yeah.
and then change its IP address from 192.168.1.1 to a different IP address that isn't currently being used in your configuration.
And then turn off the DHCP while you're in there.
Right.
And,
No DHCP.
and leave the password connection. Also go into your Wi-Fi and change the channels from to a different number than what your main modem router is using on Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
And on 2.4, the only channels that don't overlap with each other are 1, 6, and 11.
Right.
If you're within 5 channels or 4 channels of anything else that's used, you will interfere with it.
Right. So it's best.
So you can't choose 1 and 2. Does not work.
Right. Your main one could be like on 1 and 2, and then have your other, this one here on 2.4 set to like 10, 11, 12. I mean, 10 or 11.
Well, won't work. When you do channel bonding, so if you were able to use 802.11, 2.4 gigahertz channel bonded 40 megahertz wide channel, you're using both channels 1 and 6 together on all the way up through past 6 and just starting not to interfere with 11. If
Okay,
you do
well,
20 megahertz wideband channels, you could use 1 or 6, okay, and on 2 different devices, and they will interfere, but not too much, less than 5%.
for most people,
If you use 1, 4, 7, and 11, there's 10% overlap between each of those adjacent channels.
Yeah, for most people though, they don't need a 40 megahertz bandwidth.
It's not supported on all devices.
Right,
In fact, they withdrew support on some of them, but some devices still support it. I don't know why. You don't want to do 802.11n and anything beyond that if you have any older, lower, slower devices, 802.11b devices, because the 802.11b devices always win. They can't hear anything else, so they just transmit on top of anybody else. So hopefully you can get by with 802.11g or GN only and not have to support 802.11b.
Yeah, and
Great.
go with a 20 megahertz.
20 megahertz wide
band.
bandwidth would be fine.
Yeah.
And you should be okay. Other suggestion, if you avoid channel 11, you'll have less of interference with your microwave oven, which happens to transmit on channel 10. And if there's any leakage from a microwave oven, you will watch your computer go up and down while you're using the microwave. You can turn on a microwave and you can start to see, I could interfere with Zoom if I fired up the microwave and I was using channel 11 right now. There's just enough leakage that it causes headaches. And remember, you're running 50 milliwatts. That's the top that you can transmit on 802.11g and N. That microwave oven has got 2,000. Orders of magnitude more. But yeah, I would choose channels 1 and 6, unless for some reason you got a neighbor who's close by and they're using one of those channels. And then in a pinch, and you don't have the microwave on the top floor, you could use channel 11. So. Okay, let me see if I can get this thing up and running here. Minimize this, minimize this, minimize this, slide you out of the way. Get this thing. Okay, good. All right. And that. No. Oh, wonderful. My wonderful world of Adobe has decided to upgrade itself. I'll have to go in later and upgrade it again. Okay, let's do the share. All right. Okay. Can everybody see? Let's move this over a little bit. Good. Are you ready for an open source home assistant? I sort of stumbled on this by mistake and then realized that this might not be a bad choice for some of the things I've been seeing. A couple things that have happened, at least in my IoT network of devices and such. I noticed that my Wemo devices initially happened to show up on my Amazon tablet, and I was able to control them on and off. And then some update occurred, and all of a sudden it showed them all offline. But in the Wemo app, they were perfectly addressable. So obviously, there's some interaction between the Wemo switches and my Alexa and that type of OS. Haven't tried to push it further, but then something else happened recently was with my garage door opener. I never really wanted it to have full integration with my Google Assistant, but the Chamberlain people have decided that they no longer want to support integration with Google. I believe they tolerate it with Apple, but for the most part, they don't want to support, so you can't say to your assistant to open the garage door or open the pod bay doors, Al. That doesn't work anymore. So one thing you can do is to look into an open source Home Assistant. So Home Assistants 101. If you're using a Home Assistant of some sort, you are familiar either with Google, the A person, Alexa, Siri, or Cortana. And there are some other ones out there beyond that, but usually those are specific to a particular manufacturer. And if you own a Home Assistant device, you either are the Apple HomePod flavor or the Google Nest Hub Max Mini versions and audio, or the Amazon Echo Show Studios. And you might have it built into some of your devices. I know that there's Alexa thermostats with Ecobee. You can have it on tablets and computers, and of course your phone. So if you know, and you've used one of these things, you know that what a Home Assistant does, and you're comfortable with this device listening to everything that you say, because it's always listening to try and figure out if you said the magic keyword. Now, sometimes these are always sending audio back to their parent servers to do the decoding back there. Not always. Some of them are able to pick up keywords with local processing, but the local processing may need to be somewhat significant in order to recognize if the word is spoken quickly, or if you want to reliably be able to talk to the assistant, it may need to use more battery power if it's battery operated to be able to decode it. So I did a test with my Fire tablet, turned off the internet, and then asked it a question, and whether or not it did recognize the keyword to wake it up, but it couldn't do anything beyond that. So that tells me they have enough voice recognition built into my Fire tablet to recognize its name. But that doesn't always extend to other devices as well. So if you're using the Nest Hub Max, you have something like this. It may have a display, maybe not. Some of the Nest Mini and Nest Audio are similar. That's like the original Google Home speaker. Nest Mini is a smaller version, but it's a little bit less forgiving in what room it is and how the audio works. And then there's the Alexa devices that I did not put in the presentation, but they're out there. They exist. And I know some people swear by them. Some people swear at them. Difference between the Nest Hub and the Nest Hub Max. They're both touchscreens. One's 7, one's 10. They're a lot more expensive for the Nest Hub Max, which has the camera. And it also has a 3-inch diameter woofer. I don't know how thick it is to fit in a Nest Hub Max. It can't be much of a woofer then, but that's what they claim. So, and the other thing that start to become aware of, some of the integrated devices no longer work with the home assistants that used to support them. So one of them I just mentioned was the MyQ stopped working because they didn't want to support, they didn't want to have people access their API without a payment going back and forth. So in the name of money, Chamberlain has decided to say, okay, if you want to be able to open and close your garage door or check its status, you need to pay us through this integration. I mentioned the Wemo integration, and then some home assistants have been totally deprecated. You no longer have Cortana anymore on the Windows 10 or 11 machine. Unless you got an old one that didn't do any Windows updates, then you might still have something there, but I don't know who it's talking to. So, alternatives to this. This one sort of came through in an email, said, oh, homeassistant.io. What is this? It is an open source home assistant. So it's not going to run on your Google Home device. It's not going to run on a Nest. It's not going to run on Alexa. It's going to run on a standalone device, okay? And the standalone device, they do sell boxes that have some of the stuff. There's a Home Assistant Green, which is a standalone module, just like you would buy an Echo Dot, except it's probably got a little bit more facility. Home Assistant Yellow either requires or comes with a Raspberry Pi 4CM compute module with 2 gig of RAM and 16 gig of eMMC, and as an extension board, which adds gigabit Ethernet and power over Ethernet, by the way, and also Zigbee support. You can also use a Raspberry Pi 4, can be used for the Home Assistant host. And then you just download the firmware and use an SD card, and away you go. So there's a whole lot of integrations that have already been done to integrate to things like Wemo and all kinds of the different switches. The only thing you have to be careful of with some of these is what is the interface that you have to communicate to the device with. If it's not over Wi-Fi and it's with something like Zigbee or a Matter implementation, then you might need an additional USB dongle to talk to it. But this supports that dongle, and they do sell it. It's like $45 to add a Zigbee support to talk to the Zigbee controlled light bulbs and so on. With the MyQ integration, one way they can get around it is you buy this board, and I got a picture of it later in the presentation from RackGo, and they have, it plugs in to the connection for the switch on the wall, and it can talk to the garage door opener and let it know whether it's open, closed, whether it's Wi-Fi if it's locked so that it can't open with remote controls, among other things. So there's a lot of things you can do, but you have to integrate this into your garage door opener to support this in place of MyQ, if that's what you want to do. So this is what the Home Assistant Green box looks like. It looks pretty close to a Raspberry Pi, and I've supplied links for these things as well in case you want to go further with it. There is a picture of what it looks like expanded, and you can see how close it looks to some of the pieces of a Raspberry Pi itself. So what's in that box? It does connect with the gigabit Ethernet cable. Most of these things work a lot better when they are cabled in rather than Wi-Fi'd in. So it makes sense to cable some of these things in. And it's got pretty much the same kind of capabilities as a typical Raspberry Pi. It's a MIPS chip, quad core, 1.8 gig. This one has 32 gigabytes of eMMC, which means you don't have to have an SD card. Although it does have a micro SD slot and an HDMI port for diagnostic use, you don't use them normally with this hub. It has a couple of USB 2.0 type A ports, and they can supply up to 2 amps at 5 volts. And it's running with 4 gigabytes of memory. That's probably a little bit more than your average Raspberry Pi 4 has. So you can have either local control or Home Assistant cloud support with this. I don't know if they actually are charging anything for the cloud support. I bumped my the thing again here. The Cloud Assistant has capabilities to interface back to your existing Alexa or Google as well. Has remote UI capability and webhooks to set up location-based controlling. Just like when you get home, Google could turn on the lights for you. Same thing here. If you do need to use Zigbee or Thread devices, you might need what's called a SkyConnect dongle, which gives you your Zigbee interface to talk to some of those devices, and also the stack to talk to the Thread devices. Now the yellow is like the green on steroids, okay? It uses a Raspberry Pi compute module that has the memory and the processor. This has a motherboard, so to speak, that this is mounted on with gigabit Ethernet and PoE optional. Has Zigbee already built in, so you don't need the other dongle as well. It has an M.2 expansion slot. If you want to put in an SSD in there, you can go to town on that. So this is this baby server right here. So what do you need with yellow? The full yellow includes the Raspberry Pi 4 control module, compute module. Some of the other options don't include the compute module. That normally goes for about $45 because it's pretty much a stripped Raspberry 4 anyway. And there's the specs on there if you want to go look at that. There's a ton of information that's available online should you want to go look at any of this or explore it further. This is the other thing. Remember I told you they mentioned about the interface to the garage door opener for Chamberlain? Yeah, I got a loose connection here somewhere. Yes. This is the connection where it would wire into the garage door opener, and that gives you your Wi-Fi and a separate set of contact closures so that you can do other things with it and control it with this open source. And so I thought this was, an interesting thing. And then I found one other thing that showed up in my reading list recently. Haier, which makes a lot of products for General Electric, Hotpoint, Hoover, Fisher and Paykel, and Candy, also filed a lawsuit against some of the integration modules because one of the plug-in to be able to turn on the Haier air conditioners and such and turn them off and monitor them, they complained about this, that they claimed that this was threatening their sales or whatever, and they filed a cease and desist demanding this guy to remove it. Now, I don't know if this guy had any inside information or did reverse engineering on this, but he had put these things in the public domain. So if you were thinking about doing this and you wanted to get those downloads, you could get them before he pulls them. It's just an interesting thing about this. But so it seems that more than a few people have proceeded down this path. Now, that's basically what I had. The only downside on this is these are made in the People's Republic of China, which is where you expect a lot of these things have been built. But it's, one possible downside. And the green is like about $99. The yellow is about twice as much, at least. I mean, without the compute module, it was $179, and the compute module was $45. So if you can find the complete yellow module, it's like $225. But the yellow sounds like it's the green on steroids. So if you really wanted to go beyond that, that's where you would go with it. But that's basically what I had for my presentation. If you guys got any questions, feel free to jump up and ask a question. I can go to that page in the presentation, or I can just send a copy to all of you. Let's go ahead and do that. And I got to remember to do the right thing now when I share this. Okay. File. Okay. My computer. All right. Okay, open source. Home Assistant, open, and hit the send button. Now you should all get a copy of it. All right. Anybody got a problem downloading it?
Only had to scroll down first.
Okay, good. There is literally a ton of stuff that's available on that. Let me go ahead and get this. Let's get rid of this. Here, let's go ahead and share this. You were wondering what a 5131 looks like. That's like the one that I'm using because I have 4 antennas on it as well. 2 for 2.4, 2 for 5. And believe it or not, they were able to use the same antennas for either 2.4 or 5. All right, let's do this. So this is the homeassistant.io webpage. There is a lot of stuff in here if you wanted to go through this. There is something that is going on now. They have a voice assistant contest where you could actually win like a Matter Green and some other stuff as well, depending on where you would apply this. And the contest started yesterday and goes through the 10th of March. So if you wanted to go into this, you could come up with your own submission, and there's different categories for the submission: creative ideas, starting guides, best events organized, best group effort, best voice experiences, and they have a green and a Sky Connect and a spot on the closing ceremony live stream that you can present on the 10th of April. So you could be famous in the Home Assistant. I guess they have a fair number of developers that have been able to put their work in here to be able to, like, if you want to look up a integration, here's all the stuff that currently is supported here. Just some of these, okay? And if I wanted to look about my Wemos devices, there's my Wemo right there. And it basically says what kinds it supports. And if I was just going to do all of this on a Raspberry Pi, well, I might consider it. And see if this is more reliable than some of the other things I've been dealing with. So that's it's very very interesting. So the only downside on this website, it's real hard to print stuff off unless you can download it. It does not support printing of the web pages nicely at all. It only wants to print the current pages that's displayed. But if I wanted to go to GitHub, this is the GitHub stuff for that Wemo, and you can see basically how they did it. It's all done with Python modules. So they basically, you could probably download this and look at it all and figure out what they did and use it anywhere you wanted. But I don't allude to knowing everything about Python yet. I'm still learning some of that stuff. But anyhow, that's a couple of things about that. So, questions? Everyone's going to run out and do this tomorrow, right?
Yeah.
No, they're going to keep their own voice assistants and then don't care about what you're sending to Google or Alexa or Siri. I keep forgetting. I got to keep involved. There are some people that still use a lot of Apple devices. No other questions?
Yeah.
You're still scratching your head, Tim, like this is going to be something you'll have to get involved with.
Yeah. I was looking at a project, and I've had such a heavy load of stuff. I've put off a lot of projects. I can't even remember half of them that I put off because I just don't have enough time in the day to get things done.
Well, one of my projects was I had to redeploy one of my blink cameras in the basement that was looking at the mouse traps because unfortunately the Blink Mini is not waterproof. And when my sump pump decided to separate between the check valve and the sump pump and make like a fountain, it did not survive. Neither did the two outlet strips that were running the sump pump, nor the alarm system and the secondary sump pump. I had to take apart a couple of outlet modules and dry them out, put them back together again. Not fun.
Do you have a water alarm down there?
No, I didn't have a water alarm, but it would have gotten wet too.
Well, but at least it would have went off and notified you right away.
Yeah, but this thing happened at 4 a.m. I probably wouldn't have heard it because I have my phone downstairs on a charger. Because I think the Blink system tried to warn me that, hey, something happened to your Blink camera. But of course, I wasn't having, most of the time I turn off any notifications within my earshot when I'm trying to sleep at night. And that's probably when it failed. Right about 4:45 a.m. was when the Blink camera went offline. Yeah, so I know when it happened. I just wasn't there to enjoy it. And of course, then I had the humid basement for a while. Oh, yeah. I have since resecured it by more than one measure so that it shouldn't be able to come apart again. But I've also noticed that I don't think this sump pump is going to last anywhere near as long as the last one. This one had a 2-year warranty, and I think it'll just barely make it. There's just something about having the output of your water softener going into a sump pump pit that is detrimental to things made of cast iron.
Usually, at least for me on the sump pump, usually what kills mine was just enough clay in the soil that it impedes the impeller underneath and causes it to freeze up, and then kills the electrical connections.
Well, I have 2 sump pumps. And the reason being, when I used to have a half and a third, there were times when the half would be inundated by the water coming in to the drain tile from water running down the slope before I re-pitched some of the ground away from the house again from when it originally was. That the half would fall behind and then the third would kick in and then they would catch up, but it would overpower the 4-inch drain tile on the other side of the wall that it was pumping into to get away from the house. So I'd have to go out and put a 10-foot section on and shoot it into the yard so that it wasn't going around in a circle. So right now I have a 10-foot section on because the other section has frozen with the really cold temperatures. There is a ice cube about 1 foot in diameter. It's on the outside of the house right now where that pipe comes out, where it had leaked around there and started. It's like, oh, this isn't going down the pipe. This is going around in a circle. Time to run it back out in the yard again. So I did that yesterday.
All you got to do is run a pipe to your house from the Dresden pond and let the warm water melt it.
Yeah. The only little problem, it has a little bit extra tritium in there. Tritium oxide, yes, and it might glow a little bit.
Well, they're going to try and use it on the Illinois Kankakee rivers and get the ice dams.
It should do a gangbuster job. Yeah. I was figuring that's where the sandhill cranes that were overhead were flying to, thinking, what the heck are these guys doing here flying south now? You guys should have gone a long time ago. But there was like 120 of them that flew overhead yesterday, 3 batches. And the first one was really kind of low. I was surprised. I could see them really good. Yeah. But didn't have my camera out to take those guys' pictures. The other 2 sets came through and I took their pictures. But I counted like about 50 in the last group, and there was even more in the first group. So, yeah. And I was thinking, well, they could be flying. They should go a little farther southwest to go to Dresden, though, if they want to go down there. And that's open water down there. You know, as long as they got something to eat, they got water, they're fine. But yeah, so I found out that the first thing to fail on the Blink camera was the USB power supply. That looks like a little rusty and corroded and such like that, because this water was probably conductive if the sump pump was pumping what the water softener was putting out. And I probably vacuumed up about 40 or 50 gallons of water as well and recycled it outside. I know I should have used the regular Blink camera, which is water resistant, and that probably would have been better. But anyhow, I had bought extra Blink cameras. The other thing is they don't handle well when they fall off of a cabinet from a height of about 6.5 feet. There's just something about they're not shock mounted inside. And there's a little thing that rattled around. I think it was a screw, and that did not do anything good. The camera did work the first time I plugged it into another power supply. But then it stopped working and started doing the blink green thing, like, oh, you are unhappy. You're no longer connected to Wi-Fi. You can't be reset. Okay. Well, at some point in time, I'll take it apart and take a look at it further. Who knows? Maybe I'll be able to find a way to pull the camera off and hook up to a Raspberry Pi. I mean, there isn't that much to some of these devices. And yes. In Sanford, you unplugged your assistant. You don't use an assistant anymore.
You are correct. I only plug it in when I feel I need to use it. It just has not become part of our life in our house. We try to embrace it to get to do things. Mainly, we just weren't using it.
My grandkids really liked it when we were watching them here when they were much younger, and they would keep yelling to the assistant to play some particular Sesame Street song or something. And even though I did not have Spotify, it would find something equivalent, and say, play baby songs. So they got quite used to saying things to it and conflicting because they would go back and forth, see who could get it to play their thing by yelling louder. But one of the interesting parts was when my daughter and son-in-law and their family were staying here while they were renovating part of their house. My son-in-law had come back and he was watching something on TV late at night and had fallen asleep. And something on the program said, ask Google to play something on Spotify or something. And I don't have a Spotify account, but it tried to answer that thing from the TV. And all of a sudden, my son-in-law wakes up and he said, your Google Home Assistant was playing something. So I unplugged it. But the thing that was surprising was I could go back in the Google Home Assistant app and go see what triggered it, and I could listen to the audio that triggered it, and it was a commercial on TV. You would think with these assistants and artificial intelligence, they could be smart enough to know, hey, is this a commercial on a TV set that's going, or is this some human that's actually saying this? Nope, can't tell the difference.
My wife uses it. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
My wife uses it for crossword puzzles. She's always asking for all the. And
I didn't cheat. Google told me.
And there's a lot of times, she doesn't know what the answer is.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting. Sometimes you can ask it strange things like, how are you doing today? And then somebody has programmed some cute responses into the response, and I've had some very cute ones come back. Yes. What was it? There used to be one that my grandson would ask, like, what does a penguin sound like? And it would play some sound clip from, from a penguin, and they used to love hearing that kind of thing. But you hear this thing coming out of the speaker. What are you playing? But you can't. That sound clip doesn't populate up anymore. It's gone too far down in the stack for Google. Other things pop up like ads now. So yeah, this looked, like I said, it was interesting, and it's a possibility, and it's an alternative. And it's, if you have a Raspberry Pi 4 that you can't figure out what to do with, this would be an excellent experiment to see if it can do some of the things that may no longer be supported with your current assistant. They do have, like I said, a cloud capability, and the cloud can link to some of your legacy devices that may not be supported by Home Assistant. So if they're only supported by Alexa, or they're only supported by Google, you could access through that other assistant to get to those devices. The other thing that I noticed is that the Thread and Matter might not be completely implemented yet, because some of those implementations are still flux. And being in a state of flux, they change, so they may not have caught up with the implementation. That's why they had that device that you could plug in to access Zigbee and with a thread stack of after a fashion, and be able to talk to some of those devices. So if you have some of the, is it the Philips Hue light bulb, I think is one, and some of the other devices which typically use Zigbee, that would be their mechanism for access. Also, that's something else you got to be consider when you're picking up your frequencies for use for your extra Wi-Fi's. Zigbee is sharing that same band as Bluetooth, and they're all on 2.4 gigahertz. So if you have stuff that's like a Bluetooth speaker, if you got a Zigbee connection, that can interfere with your channel 6 stuff as well, because Bluetooth channel 12 and Zigbee channel 22 are both sharing channel 6 of your Wi-Fi. If you are really interested to find out where those things might be, you can go to, I think there's a Wikipedia article that shows you some of the mapping of the different channels, the Bluetooth channels and the Zigbee channels. And normally they're somewhat frequency diverse. They'll move to other frequencies to avoid interfering places, but other times it's not so good. I can't really control the Zigbee channel that my electric meter transmits to my meter reader internal inside. So it will, when I was doing RF captures of information, I was finding something that looked like 3,000 byte packets. And I said, that's not a 3,000 byte packet. That's some other sort of interference. And then I traced it down to the Zigbee. It was a Zigbee packet that was interfering, and my Wi-Fi device tried to interpret it as a packet of a certain size. It was actually a much slower, lower speed packet, but because it shared the same band and it clobbered a packet that already had a valid header, it decoded it and said, well, there's somebody still transmitting out here. Not sure what it is, but there's somebody still transmitting. But that's why some of these things are, if you could get away with it using more access points, but not running all of them at full power. See, I've done tests here when I've actually, in this one area of maybe about 40 feet square on the downstairs area here, where I would hook up somewhere between 4 and 6 access points, both on the same channel and different channels, to be able to test some of the devices that I used to test for Motorola here. And I would deliberately knock the power levels down much lower than they normally were, so that they would have less interference with each other, and I could test handoff between one device to the next device to the next device to make sure the device was working properly without having to deploy in something the size of a small factory. when you go into a place like Walmart, Walmart has a whole bunch of access points deployed. The typical mapping that they used to use in a small Walmart store was 112 access points. And you think, oh, I could have covered this with 4. No, 112 access points. But they did not run them at full power. They run them at reduced power. And there was ones outside that would cover the parking lot with longer range antennas, so they could cover the parking lot. But those are specialized ones. Sometimes the access points were on the inside wall, and they had feed throughs to have the antennas outside. So the access points not have to be, certified for minus 30 degrees or something like that. Just the antennas have to work the temperature outside. And they would use different kinds of antennas. They could either use a mesh antenna, or they could use Yagi antennas as well. They would want to be directional or omnidirectional in all one area. So, but some of the stuff that I've seen done and utilized with the 5 gigahertz. Remember, I mentioned a 5 gigahertz backhaul support between the Woodfield main Sears building and their automotive center, which was about 1,000 feet away. They used directional Yagi 5 gigahertz antennas, and that seemed to work quite well. That did not have any problem. I remembered I had reconfigured one of those access points, but those were using pretty high-end access point. It was a AP 7831, as I recall. Let's see if I can do one of those. No, it's not gonna. Yeah, it's not gonna come up for me. Let's do simple. 8. Yeah, it's not showing me what they look like. Yeah, unfortunately. Anyhow, that was a tri. It actually was an N, had a tri-band unit where it would have a 2.4 radio, a 5 gigahertz radio, and then another radio which was either 2.4 or 5 gigahertz, depending on how you configured it. And the third one was usually used for interference purposes, but could also be used for a backhaul. So you could configure one 5 gigahertz backhaul and then distribute and then broadcast on 2.4 for your devices that would connect. But then it could use 802.11n. I think it was a 3x3 capability. So it was capable of doing 450 megabits per second on the backhaul, bidirectional. So did not have any problem handling the traffic that it needed to go back and forth on there. Not sure what they did with all that equipment after they took down the, after Sears left the building, but it would be interesting to find out. Okay. Anything else that we can talk about or decide what we want for any future meetings? Carl, you're too quiet today.
So is Harry.
I will. I'm intending on having my meeting next month, but it depends a lot on how my significant other's procedure goes. She ends up going into Northwestern for a ETE surgery on Groundhog's Day. So that is a pulmonary thromboendartectomy. It's where they go in and they remove blood clots from the arteries in the lungs and such. That's where they put you into the operating theater. One group opens you up. They put you on a heart-lung bypass. They go in and they take the blood clots out, and she gets a free bypass, one free with 11, while she's there, and that's done by a different doctor. And then they close you all back up again, and then you go back to intensive care for a while, and then sometime 4 to 10 days later, you get to come home. So we'll see how that goes. But that's scheduled early part of next month. I should be home by then, but we'll see what happens.
Well, take care of what needs to be taken care of.
Well, when she had her hip replacements done, they did not put her on blood thinners other than
Yeah.
2 baby aspirin. And that's what the doctor who does this work has leapt upon as the root cause of what happened. So he thinks that was that's the root cause, that's the reason of her issue, and that's what they're proceeding from. Otherwise, they did not have any real reason why this happened. Sometime after her second hip surgery, and she was shortness of breath, and he was quite surprised that the local pulmonologist was able to diagnose it as such. He wondered whether that pulmonologist had seen one of his lectures. There's only 3 hospitals in the area, 3 hospitals in the U.S. that do this work. The 2 that had done this in the past were UCSD and Temple, and now Northwestern downtown has done about 100 of these so far. So she gets to go do that.
Well, I wish everybody good luck with all that's going on.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, she's already had the left and right heart catheterizations, which are all interesting by their own. Here, we're going to run this tube down and take a look at these clots. Okay, measure the pressure. We're going to measure the pressure right here. But
yeah, that whole thing sounds like some circulatory and cardiovascular issues.
It is, and so she's on this one medication now that I keep doing battle with my local Cigna people, which can't seem to figure out how it was correctly billed or whatever. The specialty pharmacy and the pharmacy that bills it, Express Scripts, they have gotten everything together. It's just that the Cigna, who owns both of these 2 and is the insurance company, hasn't got it quite figured out yet.
I had Cigna back in the day, and when I was in Illinois, and they were not the brightest company then, and they may not be the brightest company now, but they were better than Humana.
Yeah, this is with just a Medicare Part D plan, and they got the special authorization to do this. Okay, so the special authorization said it was good until till this year on the 31st of December. And so they said it's okay, even though this thing costs about $14,875 per fill.
Yeah. What I'm on now is a Medicare Advantage plan from Blue Cross Blue Shield. Massachusetts. Massachusetts has, I think, better insurance options than Illinois, as long as you don't try to get with Humana in Massachusetts. In fact, I think Humana may have pulled out. They had 2 counties they were still in Massachusetts.
Well, so far we were on just the Medicare plus Medigap, and we only had to pay our deductible. And each one of those catheterizations was, let's see, the amount that was billed to Medicare was about $39,000.
Yeah.
So we paid our deductible and haven't had to pay anything since. So, but yeah, it's not an Advantage plan, but hopefully, I know that certain things have gone up a little bit, but I know that if you go to an Advantage plan and you ever want to come back, they can reevaluate you when you come back for any reason, and Medicare will cover you, but the other insurers may choose not to.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's the downside. Oh, yeah. But you might get money back, or you might get
maybe
all those ads that they have on the TV.
You get money back up front, but then you get charged more for everything down the line.
Yeah, and there's no free ride. It's all going to come due some point in time.
Well, anyway, the outcome of my little computer issue is I am in the process of reinstalling Ubuntu, so I at least have one Linux, and then I'll get on with Mint. And
Which
there's
version
one,
of you? Which one is Ubuntu? Are you loading the newest ones or?
the Unity flavor and the 2204 long-term stability.
2204. Okay.
Yeah, and that means I don't have the latest greatest, but come April, May, I usually wait till July to get the next one.
I've had no problem with the LTS releases, even the fossilized ones. I mean, some of those old ones, they boot up, they work exactly the way you're supposed to. Everything is deterministic. That's what you want. You want your machine to fire up, do what it needs to do, and then you can, good, that's done. Thank you.
In the Linux SIG, we can have a little discussion, if possible, about Ubuntu's move towards snaps and their increasingly intrusive ads for their subscription service, which is aimed at enterprise.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I've seen a few YouTube videos of people who I guess used to be very much supporters of Ubuntu that have quit Ubuntu altogether.
It's like people getting out of GitHub and going over to GitLab. That sort of thing. People in the open source community, some of us tend to be purists. And for us, there's Linux Mint LMDE. I think I'm going to try LMDE 6 with Cinnamon 6.
Oh, I've got it right here.
Yeah.
And I've been using it. It's solid. 5 wasn't bad. It was prior to 5 that LMDE was a dog.
Yeah.
But 5 was decent. 6 so far has been real solid. But it's a case where right now I'm seeing 21.3 is now released on regular Mint,
Right.
and they think they have conquered a lot of the problems of Wayland.
I am going to be installing this time around probably 21.3 or soon for the regular Cinnamon that we use in our Linux SIG. And I'm doing LMDE because their worst fears about Ubuntu seem to be materializing.
Well, and if that comes to pass, we may all end up on LMDE, just because of the fact that the regular Mint is relying upon Ubuntu modules, and if they want to play games, they want to play games. There isn't much you can do about it, but there's a lot of other Linux distros that work off of Ubuntu also that are going to have some of the same kind of problems. It's just that the Mint team, shall we say, got ahead of the curve.
Well, they were investigating, experimenting, and playing around, just as some of us wish we could do with Windows.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's by having the LMDE version, at least they're ahead of the game. Anybody else with a distro based upon Ubuntu may find out they've got some serious problems down the road, and they may be stuck.
Yeah,
For the others that are on the conversation here that may
Yeah.
have wondered, what the hell is LMDE? That
Yeah,
stands for
Linux
Linux
Mint,
Mint Debian.
Yeah, Debian edition.
Debian edition. Debian is the grandfather of all the Debian family Linux.
Including
And
Ubuntu.
Debian tends to be really conservative. They have a rolling release, which is much more upstream, but their stable release is rock solid. It's as solid as the long-term stability releases of some of the other operating systems. It's not like what Windows is getting into, where they're dumping everything on us and making us beta testers or even alpha testers.
Did
There was just
anybody install January's update yet?
I was about to mention that.
Thank you.
I am doing my repartitioning partly inspired by the report in the Windows Secrets newsletter by Susan Bradley about terrible problems people ran into. Here's what I have. I have in my Intel NUC PC Windows that used to be Windows 10 and became Windows 11. Windows 10, the recovery partition was about 800 megabytes. And 800 megabytes is not that bad until you go up to 11 and it crams a little bit more into the recovery environment. And it crams and crams and crams until you're trying to cram about 10 pounds of potatoes into a 5-pound sack and everything breaks.
But see, the funny
And it's
part,
no longer potatoes.
That also happened to my Grub in the EFI boot partition for Linux.
well, that computer that I'm trying to deal with from the other person, biggest problem is right now the recovery environment, but on 10. And for some reason, it thinks it's either that kind of a problem, malware, or some kind of corruption going on. Everything I check out so far says there's no corruption. Then I got into doing Malwarebytes all the way down to rootkit. That thing is probably still running right now. And the next step is see about check disk and see if check disk can find something that nothing else has found so far.
Is this an SSD?
Yes, it is.
Okay, you may want to use one of the things equivalent to like Samsung Magician, see if there's the underlying structure of the SSD is okay as well.
That's a possibility too. Not a
Because
joke.
I have gone and done that and discovered that some parts of it, once you get a bad block somewhere's created in the SSD, even if when you go to do backups or something, it'll always kill things like the Acronis backup unless you check the box that says ignore the bad sectors.
Right.
You have to work around those things. And other than reformatting and trying to reload again, I almost want to put a new SSD in its place.
Well, the thing
yeah,
about the thing about SSDs that I find the most with Windows 10 or 11 is corruption occurring after you've done an update or an upgrade. And you almost invariably have to run SFC scan tool to find out. If it says there's no problem, okay. If it has a problem but fixed everything, 2 months in a row, I will run the DIMS tool for restoring health. But if it's only 1 month and it's okay the next month, I don't bother. But the DISM tool is, shall we say, the safety valve. But I've also had occasion where even SFC doesn't show a problem of any kind, and yet a backup utility like Macrim Reflect chokes on it. So I've had to run check disk, and then all of a sudden Macrim Reflect will work fine. So there's got to be some other corruption going on, because SFC only looks at the OS modules that are for the boot up process. They don't look beyond that.
Right. But I've had the same thing where, like I said, I've had to do the full check disk, all 5 scans before it finally found, and to do all of the sectors here, check for anything else bad and spare it out. So, and I've gotten all of the things that showed up bad on Magician to go away. Okay, said, okay, we spared it out, but it still has other errors when it's read to do the backup. So I've had to check ignore the bad blocks still.
Well, you
Magician
gotta,
says everything looks fine. There's nothing bad here, and then I go ahead and try and do a backup, and it fails.
well, you also have to watch it. I've been noticing on a lot of systems with SSDs, uh, the manufacturers are putting them in, yes, but they don't provide over provisioning, which is required on an SSD, but not on a spinning hard drive because it has a hidden area for bad
Right.
blocks. With
I mean,
over,
I've reserved like 10% of the SSD
yeah,
for over provisioning. So it had it, and it still was unable to deal with this bad sector. I mean,
wow.
I got through and had the magician goes through and says, "Oh, unable to fix this." You know, like, well,
Oh.
what is the purpose of this tool if you're not going to be able to spare it out? Oh, we'll run check disk and let check disk find it and fix it. So, but I don't think that's really using the over positioning spares. So I'm not sure who is the one that needs to fix this, or if I have to wait for a newer version of Samsung Magician.
Well,
Or
you
maybe
gotta, you,
maybe a firmware upgrade.
well,
I did the firmware updates too on the SSD. So
well, the other thing is you have to watch it with Magician because depending on the age of your device, Magician won't work correctly if you got too new of a version versus the device you are trying to work with.
Mhm.
So I've actually had to find old versions on some of my old SSDs just to have Magician work.
Well, I'm trying to look at the version that I'm using right now. I think it's 7 dot something because when I went to 8.1 or whatever they said the latest one was, that one did not work. And what I ended up doing was uninstalling it, going back to 7, letting it upgrade to the 7.1 dot whatever it was that you can't find in the downloads for Samsung, and that's what I had ended up installing and using. I didn't use the 8 dot because the 8 dot couldn't fix stuff.
Well, the only thing I can think of is Samsung doesn't expect you to always have the latest, greatest in hardware, and they ignore their older hardware that's still running fine by and
Yeah,
large on other systems.
yeah,
Also, remember, Samsung, like all other manufacturers, has about 3 different tiers of quality.
yeah.
They have a gamer quality, which is too expensive for most of us. They have an intermediate quality, and they have the OEM quality, which is just pretty much silicon garbage. And I have looked at the specs on all of them, and I see once you get down below a certain model of Phison controller, you can't even do UASP if it's in an enclosure.
Yeah.
And
I do.
UASP, for those who don't know, has to do with a function called trim, which is garbage collection.
Yeah.
It's basically something that Windows is always doing on conventional hard drives if you are doing disk cleanup
Yep. Let's see.
or Storage Sense, because Storage Sense will run automatically in the background.
Right. Summary. This is.
Oh, and if Ed, if you're not familiar with it, unofficially to officially, Microsoft, besides its Power Toys, has PC Manager, and
Yeah.
PC Manager pulls together all of the tools going as far back as Windows XP together, so you don't have to know each individual one, where to go to launch each individual tool. It's one interface now. And
Oh, cool.
current version is 3.8.10.0. I got my copy from techspot.com and look for PC Manager, and you can download it.
Okay.
And it also has in the toolbox the ability to create a toolbar that whatever side you have your taskbar on, you cannot dock that toolbar there, but the other three sides, you can dock the toolbar. You can add tools to that little toolbar. I like to have a notepad, the launch tool for screen capture, and calculator, because I use calculator enough from time to time. This gives
Uh-huh.
me a quick way of getting it up by just going up to the bar and saying, click on calculator, and it's done.
Right. Okay.
And again, this sort of harkens back to Windows 95 when we had a sidebar.
Yeah.
Yep.
And
I love
in
sidebar.
Ubuntu Unity, there's a sidebar. Other desktops in Linux either have a top bar or a drop down or both.
Also, in Windows 11, Microsoft created finally a replacement for Windows 7 backup tool. It's a backup utility, but at the moment, it seems to be requiring you to back up to your OneCloud account. And if you haven't got enough space, you got to buy more space.
And Sanford says he misses the shortcut keys.
Yeah.
You can make macros, but it takes work.
Yeah, I like the shortcut keys. I used to assign it to calculator of all things, just like Tim was saying. Three fingers, characters, boom, I'd have calculator up and running.
Right.
Now you can't even do that anymore. They took it all away.
Right.
Yeah, if you hit any kind of a function key with C, you get Copilot.
Right.
Not what you wanted.
Yeah, that's evolution, I guess is the best way to put
Then you get Copilot saying, "I'm sorry, Dave, I cannot let you do that."
it.
I can't let you do that, Dave.
It's one of those things. What are you going to do? I mean, you can get your own keyboard mapper and try and remap things the way you want it, but that's extra work and effort to do that too.
I had one. I have a Chromebook that I converted to Linux, and I had to do some keyboard remapping.
Yeah, if you got Power Toys on Windows 10 or 11, you do have a keyboard mapper in there
Yeah.
if you want to use it.
Again, Windows 95 used to have a key mapper.
Yep, it did.
Yeah, but I can't remember when the hell they dropped it out too.
Probably as soon as they went up to the numbered windows
Could
and
be.
no longer lettered.
Well, back in the day of Windows 95 and then 98, even through past XP, Dell was selling programmable keyboards.
Yeah.
They were providing them with their computers, and they were great. They had them on the PS2 style plugin at the time, and I kept them for as many years as I could, keeping them running and utilizing them until I couldn't find a way to connect them up to a new computer. But the best thing about them is I could literally program keys to do functions, to do a series of keystrokes. And I was doing a lot of data processing at the time. Well, look at this beauty.
Programmable LEDs.
Yeah, not just mapping, but I was doing actual scripts in the keyboard. And they were all keyboard combinations because some of the data processing I was doing, I'd have to, go to the end of the line, backspace, put a comma in, put a space in, carriage return. All these were just like functions because I was dealing with databases. And I found that it worked great on the Dells, but they got rid of them.
Well, little be known to most people, in Unicode, there are 4 levels of key assignment, and they all mean different things. And in Linux and Unix, and to some extent Apple, you can actually uncover all these. But in Windows, they chose to assign them elsewhere.
I just remember the old Northgate keyboard where you actually could reprogram any key to do anything you wanted. But that one had the old style PS1 connector on it, or actually the great PCAT connector.
Well, mine that I just showed you is just USB.
Yeah, well, this is long before USB, but with a Northgate keyboard, you could defend yourself in a zombie attack.
Yeah, now
Those are made of steel.
now there are special controllers for that.
Yeah.
And quite
Okay.
frankly, the controllers are a little more ergonomic.
Just a little bit, but there's something that's be safe for longevity. If you pick up an old keyboard that's 30 some odd years old and you plug it in and it works, that's amazing.
Yeah.
I recently did something where we were working with an artist, and she brought out these old Underwood typewriters
Wow.
Yep.
and had us type on those so that would become part of her artwork. So now these are all becoming museum pieces.
Yeah, and some of them are worth money.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you might, and if that big EMP pulse goes overhead, you're going to be wishing you had one of those, right?
Yep.
Okay. Well, I think we got everything taken care of. I will see if I can find out something interesting to talk about next month, and hopefully, it'll be lively and entertaining, and maybe LMDT. Who knows?
How to win a big lottery and not have to pay any taxes anywhere. How's that for a topic?
Well, yeah, you could do that. It's just that you have to become a resident of your own nation island or something like that,
I was
and
thinking of
give up your
planet.
U.S. citizenship.
I was thinking that you'd have to have your own planet.
Well, that too, but the problem is transportation is a little bit stiff.
Well,
You may need more than that lottery ticket to get back and forth.
mm-hmm. Oh well.
Unless you're an Elon, and you can, just say, it'll cost you 2 Elons to get there.
Not even worth one.
Yeah, not even worth one.
Yeah, now he's
Okay.
saying that his rockets only work with a payload.
Yeah.
But weight is super critical, like it always was back in the early days of airline flight.
Yeah, true.
They used to weigh you and your luggage.
They still did that in Russia as of, when was that, 98?
Yeah.
On domestic air travel, they would
Yep.
weigh all of your luggage.
Mhm.
Number 2 pencil and luggage. Write everything down.
Yep.
Yep. Except that wasn't exactly in Moscow where that one occurred. That was in Rostov-on-Don.
Okay.
Interesting place, right on the Black Sea there. Not too far
Oh.
away from where this stuff is
Rostov.
happening in Ukraine.
Yeah, just a little ways away.
Yeah.
Within range of drones.
Yeah. So, actually, it was like halfway between where Putin likes his summer home and the work and the stuff that's been done in Crimea. So it was like halfway in between those two.
Well,
Yeah.
I did find out in my Linux what I may have been doing wrong in my installation. I had failed to define where the EFI boot partition was.
Oh, bad user on device.
There was a piptech.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you very much. Okay, I will see you guys.